Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Caleb Holloman. I hope you all had a wonderful 4th of July, filled with many explosions that didn't harm anyone. Today we will be talking about a paternity test for 5 goats, as well as some goat war stories. A bevy of pop culture figures being used around the entire globe for coronavirus awareness. After that, we'll talk about how Poland accidentally invaded the Czech Republic. And a few more invasion stories. Accidental invasions, of course. And then for the final segment, we will go over my top 10 gods. Avoiding all controversy, as is normal on this show. Alright, so a woman sues for a paternity test on goats. This occurred in Odessa, Florida. Of course, as if it could occur anywhere else. Look, I don't want to say anything about the Floridians, but this story sounds ridiculous until you say that it happened in Florida. Then clarity kind of comes into the picture. So this woman named Chris Headstorm filed a lawsuit against her neighbor, Heather Diner. This was a few months ago, and the lawsuit was for Chris requesting a DNA sample from the parents of the goats that she purchased from her neighbor. Headstorm paid Diner $900 for 5 Norwegian dwarf goats in December. The goats' names are Bella, Gigi, Rosie, Zelda, and Margot, which kind of hits close to home. We have a dog named Bella, our favorite game is Zelda, and we have a little brother named Margot, so this story gets kind of personal for me. So Chris Headstorm began this lawsuit because she believes that the goats sold to her should be registered. They should be registered goats. And so for those of you not in the goat industry, or those of you not living in Florida, registered goats have higher values than unregistered goats. Now, I know you're wondering what an unregistered goat is. So I did a little research, and digging deeper into this led me to the American Dairy Goat Association. So I clicked on that website and immediately bookmarked it, and the headline is, the most trusted dairy goat registry since 1904. In addition to preserving pedigrees, maintaining herd books, and sanctioning dairy goat shows, the American Dairy Goat Association has performance programs. That's their big headline. And then below that it says log in or become a member. Look, we're not here to talk about the format of the website here, so let me move on. The ADGA boasts over 2 million... The ADGA boasts over 2 million registered dairy goats, over 19,000 members, 1,200 shows yearly, goat shows, let me remind you, and 116 years of serving the dairy goat industry. Now, there is an asterisk here mentioning that these yearly goat shows has slowed down ever since COVID started. So just another thing to add to the list of horrible impacts COVID has had on our society. No more goat shows. 1,200 goat shows yearly. That's 4 per day. People lost their minds. They also boast their youth membership programs as well as their scholarship programs. So if you're struggling to find a scholarship and you have a goat or two laying around, why don't you hit up the ADGA and see where they can take you? So basically, the mission of this goat association is to kind of organize and ensure the production and preserve the pedigrees of dairy goats. And this lady's suing another lady because she believes that the goats she bought 3 months ago should have been registered with the ADGA. That's the abbreviated monogram for the Goat Association. So according to the lawsuit, Headstrom believed that the goats should be registered with the American Dairy Goat Association. She cited that it undervalues the goats that she bought, the fact that they are not registered with the ADGA. Now, the lady who sold the goats, her name is Diner. She has been selling goats for about 10 years and, in fact, typically provides information to her clients to help them register the animals themselves at the ADGA. Diner argues that the father goat was registered, but the Tampa Bay Times reports that the ADGA rejected the application to register the babies because Diner is not an active member of the ADGA. She never filed her forms properly. It's a sad turn of events. The lawsuit goes on to say that the DNA test would require 40 strains of the father goat's hair for the DNA test, and the woman suing requested the DNA back in February. Frustrated with these events, Diner offered a refund of the money in exchange for the goats back. She's had enough with the ADGA. She doesn't want anything to do with it, frankly. Neither do I anymore. I'm going to delete my membership. Diner goes on to say that she has been being harassed by this purchaser, saying that the purchaser called the police on her for 3 straight months in a row and even trespassed on her farm. A Hillsborough County Sheriff deputy visited the property at least 3 times during the spring. And that's where our story comes to a grinding halt as we wait for this lawsuit to unfold. So this story reminds me of another one from a few years ago. And I'm not talking about goat yoga. You can look that up. And I'm not talking about the goat heist of weed, where they went through and ate a bunch of weed crops and got super high. You can read that story on your own as well. The story I'm going to bring to you is the story of William Windsor. First of all, he's a goat. He's a cashmere goat. And he served as a lance corporal in the 1st Battalion of the Royal Welsh and Infantry Battalion of the British Army. Now, William Billy Windsor, it's Billy because he's a billy goat, he served as a lance corporal from 2001 until 2009, except for a 3-month period in 2006 when he was actually demoted after inappropriate behavior at the Queen's official birthday celebrations while deployed on active duty. And he eventually retired to Whipsnade Zoo on May 2009. This is where the real juice of the story comes in. So this William Windsor character, he wasn't the first goat in the military. It's actually a tradition for the British people, going all the way back to 1775. So, while us Americans were writing the most important document known to humanity, the British were enlisting goats into the military, which, frankly, I always wondered how they lost the Revolutionary War, but it's starting to all come back to me. They say this military craze began when a wild goat walked onto a battlefield in Boston during the American Revolutionary War, and he led the Welsh regimental colours at the end of the Battle of Bunker Hill. Now, this goat goes unnamed, but there was another Welsh military goat named Taffy the Fourth, which served in the First World War. He was part of the 2nd Battalion Welsh Regiment and officially recorded as the regimental goat. He embarked for the war on 13 of August 1914 and saw action in the retreat from Mons, which, if you know anything about that battle, was just an awful battle. But apparently he was one of the few lucky ones who survived. Can you believe that, a goat retreating? Oh, it must have been a sight. This goat went on to be awarded the 1914 Star, British War Medal, and the Victory Medal. Can you imagine being one of the, bipedal humans to win a Victory Medal? And you're standing on a podium next to a goat. Your family's clapping and taking pictures for you. Now, of course, it's often cited that they're obviously not used for actual military exercises. It's more of just a publicity thing to make the military appear a little more lighthearted and a little more open to fun adventure experiences. Whether you think having a goat on your side is something to encourage you to join the military, that's to your interpretation. But I think I'd be more likely to join if I got to meet a goat with a Victory Medal. Now, going back to the mid-1800s, there was actually a royal goat herd that was presented from the Tsar of Persia to Queen Victoria as a gift upon her ascension to the throne. The herd thrived all the way until 2001, when they reached a population of 250 and were in danger of running out of food. Following the complaints about goats wandering into the people's gardens, the council rejected proposals for a cull, deciding that the use of a combination of rehoming and birth control. So, sounds like these guys got in contact with our good friends over at the ADGA and got the breeding under control. Okay, now you remember William Windsor? Well, a few years after his tragic death in 2009, the British government came up with a William Windsor II. So they selected this goat from a litter, and with some difficulty, the 5-month-old was assigned an army number 25142-301. This one's hard for me to get through. I'm sorry. I apologize. But he was part of the 23rd Regiment of Foot, and according to this article, he would receive a ration of 2 cigarettes per day, which he does eat reportedly every single day. And he's not allowed to have Guinness until he's older, but he can be in the military. So that's cool, I guess. These stories also remind me of Wojtek the bear. That's a much more popular story where the Polish land forces actually trained a bear to be part of their military forces. That makes a bit more sense than the goats. But look, I think we might be slightly straying from the original story that a Florida woman is suing over the paternity of 5 goats. But that's what we're here for, folks. We're here to find some weird news and to expand on it. Expand your historical knowledge. And hopefully you become better people, as I know I have after reading this article. Alright, anyway, that's it for this segment. Stick around to the next segment when we will be discussing people dressing up as famous characters in order to convince people to stay home during quarantine. They're telling people to stay home while dressed as Darth Vader, while dressed as Spider-Man. We'll get into that and more when we come back for the break. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. We just talked about war goats. Kind of sad that section's over, but now we're going to move on to an assortment of stories where people dress up as famous pop characters, popular culture characters, in order to convince people to stay home during quarantine. Later, I'll be going over my top 10 gods. You're not going to want to miss that, so stay tuned. Alright. So this first influencer comes to us from the Philippines, and it's actually great what they're doing over here. They're dressing up as Star Wars characters. They're getting on little pine wood boats, going down the rivers of the Philippines, dressed as Darth Vader and stormtroopers, and threatening people. They're threatening people's lives, saying that they need to stay indoors. It's like kind of by threat of violence, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. But there's good news too. While they're yelling at people, enforcing the strict quarantine measures, they're also handing out relief packages, which I think that's just great. That's making the best of a bad situation. Now, the Philippines is, they don't have a lot of resources, should we say. So, these Darth Vader and Stormtrooper outfits are actually made from rubber mats, old plastic, and the youth leaders catch the attention of the villagers, who are then reminded to stay indoors. That's the idea behind this, is to look as menacing as possible. As you remind people not to, to keep 6 feet of distance. When interviewed, one of the stormtroopers said, "We tell off residents who still go outdoors without the proper quarantine passes needed, and also those who do not wear face masks. We make sure the government guidelines are properly followed." I wish I could put the Star Wars music in this podcast without being sued, but that would go great over that statement. But, of course, they aren't taken too seriously. Usually, he says they're greeted with smiles, and the villagers often enjoy the distraction from the outbreak itself. In mid-May, the Philippines recorded 9,485 confirmed coronavirus cases, 623 deaths, and 1,315 recoveries. So hopefully we'll see those numbers diminishing as Darth Vader keeps scolding the people of the Philippines. Really, though, it's pretty cool that they're handing out relief packages while they do this. Just a nice safety reminder. Alright, let's move on to our next little tidbit. And this tidbit comes from Indonesia, where volunteers clad as Superman and Spider-Man, quote, sprayed disinfectant against coronavirus on Indonesia's island of Java, flanking a colleague wearing a winged helmet of local superhero Gata Kauka, who shouted, "Wear masks, wash hands, and stay alert." Similar to our last story, they also came prepared with relief packages, handing out masks, containers of hand sanitizer, and bamboo slit drums while demonstrating how to correctly wash hands. Now, Indonesia has a bit of a bigger problem than the Philippines. Their numbers are 11,000 virus cases and 845 deaths. Most of this was due to a sluggish early response from the government, which is incredibly unfortunate, but thank God we have Spider-Man and Superman to come to help the people. The man who coordinated this event, his name is Widanarko. He said, "If the superheroes support the measures, the children will definitely obey the orders," which is, I think, a very interesting approach to the situation, because it's well known that viruses get spread very quickly by children. That's why when shutdowns started to happen, the first places to be shut down were schools. So by dressing up as superheroes, you have a much larger chance of influencing the younger people in society. So it's a pretty innovative approach to the whole situation. The leader went on to say that he wants to influence the children by, quote, "first washing their hands, second not wandering outside, and always wearing a face mask," which is, of course, what all the health professionals recommend. So if you're not doing those, why don't you do those? It'll be nice. Help out your fellow man and yourself by relation. Now, earlier I mentioned that they were handing out bamboo slit drums, which you might be wondering what that is. That's just it's basic. It's basically just something that makes a really loud noise, just a bamboo rod. And the reason they're handing these out is because of all the robbery and thefts enacted by criminals who take advantage of the measures against the virus. So they're basically handing out whistles for people to avoid getting robbed, which is also fantastic. They don't have much of a police force, a respondents force, so you got to do with what you can, and apparently this is helping out. And this has also had a very positive response from the residents in Indonesia. One of them saying, "Usually it's very difficult to ask the children to wear masks, because for them it's a hassle." The man went on to say that the caricatures of the superheroes help the children and encourage them to take the virus seriously, which many of them were not doing previously due to the late response of the Indonesian government. And to kind of further this inspiration, it actually inspired other philanthropists to come out and follow the footsteps of Superman and Spider-Man. So some more volunteers came out dressed as Deadpool. One of them was Black Panther, and one of them even dressed as a Indonesian exclusive superhero called Bima X. And they held up placards that read, "Stay home and get well soon, Earth." So it's always good to see a positive response to a tragedy. Alright, time for our third story, which we're going back to Florida for this one, and you can immediately tell this becomes a lot darker of a story. So a Florida attorney dresses like the Grim Reaper at Jacksonville Beach for July 4th weekend. So he's really on the nose with this one. He's not jerking around at all, trying to dress as a superhero. He's going out and saying, "Hey, if you're at the beach, you're gonna die, maybe." The man's name is Daniel Ulefielder, and he put on an entire Grim Reaper costume with a scythe and everything. And speaking out against, quote, "the misinformation to warn people about the dangers of COVID-19. That is his mission. Of course, 4th of July weekend is one of the most popular weekends for Jacksonville Beach, Florida. The only exceptions being spring break and New Year's. This is the first major one of those holidays where people have been allowed on the beach since COVID. So it's kind of interesting to see how people would respond to such an allowance of freedom. Daniel Ulefielder, the man dressed as the Grim Reaper, said, quote, "I talked to some of the millennials in their 20s who wanted to talk about why I was doing this, why they may disagree with certain parts of it. I tried a social media campaign. I tried suing the governor to close the beaches and do a stay-at-home order. We have to take this into our own hands, unfortunately, because our leaders aren't doing the right thing." Now, of course, the beaches remained open during July 4th, which made him very unhappy. He went on to say, "I had a very good discussion with a lot of people, but then there are some detractors that are just trolls, but they don't bother me." Which is good, because I'd imagine if you bother the Grim Reaper, it might not go well for you. He went on to post footage and photos of his Grim Reaper tour on Twitter, and it now has over 2,400 likes, 97 comments, and 489 retweets. Now, of course, since its opening, Florida has seen a growing trend of positive COVID-19 cases, with the number surpassing the state's initial peak back in April. Over the past 2 weeks alone, July 2nd marked the 10th straight day where the number of newly reported coronavirus cases was more than 5,000. And as of July 3rd, there were 178,594 cases, 3,684 deaths, and 15,491 hospitalizations in the state of Florida. Now, not satisfied with my, unquenchable thirst for knowledge, I dug deeper into this story and I watched a short video on it, and it seemed like the guy's approach was working. He kind of just wants to open a dialogue on the whole quarantine situation, and that dialogue seemed to be occurring on the Jacksonville beach. Occasionally he would get somebody who would yell at him, flip him off, and he even had a few people be escorted from the beach by police because they were harassing him. He has a right to do what he's doing on the beach, and he has a right to do it without people harassing him, whether you disagree with him or not. Alright, on to our fifth little short story, similar to the last one. In India, a local artist dressed up as Yam Raj, which is essentially the Indian equivalent of the Grim Reaper, and he visited various markets of Udhampur city on Friday in order to create awareness about COVID-19. He urged people to apply social distancing, wear masks, and not come out of their houses unnecessarily. The man was named Deepak Kumar, and he said, quote, "It's your duty as well to understand that social distancing is important. People should wear their masks." Not very inflammatory, but when you hear it in his own voice, it's a bit more exciting. Let me play a quick little audio clip for you, folks. So that's just a little preview of him shouting in a market square. And what he said was, "Prime Minister Modi has been stating the same thing for your safety only. I am Yam Raj and I am tired now. Hence, I thought of coming here and tell people to stay home and not gather in market areas." This emphatic display went on to inspire one of the Indian cops to do the exact same thing. He dressed as Yam Raj, went into his own little town square, and started doing the same thing, except he had a police car, so he turned his sirens on and started shouting the exact same phrases. Now, this kind of created a social media frenzy. People were getting selfies and signing off with this cop who kind of became a small celebrity. And so he actually did a really good job at creating awareness as India tried to reopen. And his Facebook page now has over 2,000 shares and over 1,000 likes on this one story. India's death toll due to coronavirus reached 480 on Saturday, with the total number of confirmed cases at 14,387. This statistic notes, though, that it's very difficult to measure these numbers in India when you have such a high condensed population, and frankly, you don't have the same resources most countries have to test the virus itself, so you have to take these statistics with a grain of salt. But hopefully these will inspire the numbers to decrease. Alright, that's it for this segment. Stay tuned after the commercial, and I will be talking about an accidental invasion. Poland invaded the Czech Republic last month, and said that it was a misunderstanding. So stay tuned, and we will dive into that.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. We just talked about some people dressing up as famous popular culture characters in order to inspire people to stay at home and wear masks and wash hands as they give out care packages. Pretty inspiring, as we see that nice little example of people helping people. And we're going to diverge from that for just a second to talk about Poland accidentally invading the Czech Republic. Alright, so according to London, the Polish military has admitted to accidentally invading the Czech Republic. But it insists on its brief occupation of a small part of the country as simply a misunderstanding. The Polish soldiers mistakenly crossed the country's border with the Czech Republic back in late May before setting up there. They actually built a camp and everything in a country that was not theirs, so they technically occupied a part of the Czech Republic. These soldiers were on duty to guard the border between the Poles and the Czechs during the coronavirus pandemic. It was their job to turn away any Czech citizens who were attempting to visit a church in Polish country. There was a somewhat mass migration, as a lot of the famous churches in Polish society are visited by Czech citizens on an annual basis, so it's kind of a traditional exercise, and these guards were stationed to turn those people around and tell them to go home and stay quarantined. But instead, they accidentally kind of took over part of the Czech Republic. And the snafu led the Czech embassy in Warsaw to take, quote, immediate action. They notified the Polish government, and the Polish government has still not formally explained why it mistakenly annexed its neighbor. Now, the Czech Republic had a few statements on the matter, the first of which is, our Polish counterparts unofficially assured us that the incident was merely a misunderstanding caused by the Polish military with no hostile intention. However, we are still expecting a formal statement. The Polish soldiers are no longer present, and our citizens can again visit the site freely. So they actually had citizens of the Czech Republic going to an actual Czech Republic site and being turned away by foreign military. Poland's Ministry of Defense finally acknowledged the mistake of brief occupation last Friday. Quote, "The placement of the border post was a result of misunderstanding, not a deliberate act. It was corrected immediately, and the case was resolved." He said that him and the Czech side have an understanding of the situation. The incident occurred in Pilgrismau, which is my weekly mispronunciation. The Polish Ministry of Defense went on to explain, "Soldiers of the Polish army supported the border guard in protecting the state border after its closure due to the coronavirus pandemic. The operation is led by armed forces. Operational Command, which is in direct contact with the border guard." So these aren't just border guards, these are fully armed military men. Now, unfortunately, that's kind of the end of that story. It kind of just peters out, but it brings to mind a bunch of past accidental invasions, which we are now going to go over. Alright, the first of which is a Nicaraguan military commander which accidentally invaded a Costa Rican border due to a Google Maps error. So a Nicaraguan commander named Eden Pastora accidentally took his troops and invaded Costa Rica. He didn't know he was in Costa Rica. He blames that misunderstanding on Google Maps, saying that there was a glitch in the system. So anyways, he goes into the Costa Rica territory, finds a Costa Rican flag, sees it as treason, tears it down, and puts up a Nicaraguan flag. You might be hearing the laugh of my first audience. His name is Ryan. We'll have a top 10 on Ryan someday. This caused a major dispute, and the UN Security Council are being called to mediate the dispute. And they're agreeing that it's Google's fault, claiming that Costa Rica is seeing its dignity smeared, and there is a sense of great national urgency. Now here's the twist on the plot. Google actually admitted to its mistake, saying that an error by up to 2.7 kilometers arose in the compilation of the border source data with the U.S. Department of State. So now they're revising that data and making sure that they get the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua accurately as possible to avoid any other invasions. The geopolicy analyst at Google said, quote, "Cartography is a complex undertaking and borders are always changing. I have to admit, though, that I think some of the blame lies with the Nicaraguan military. Just the fact that they're using Google Maps for military operations. It seems like an unreliable source for, military knowledge. Hopefully they won't be so dependent on Google in the future. Alright, time for our next little story, where a group of 60 Venezuelan soldiers crossed the border into Colombia and destroyed a banana plantation in a, quote, totally unacceptable violation of national sovereignty. The Venezuelan troops were engaged in routine border patrols. The foreign minister, Deli Rodriguez, said, quote, "In the face of these falsehoods aimed at producing confrontation between fraternal nations, we want to make a point of repudiating the constant insults and the economic, diplomatic, political, commercial, and financial attacks on Venezuela by Colombian oligarchy. We are the victims of never-ending conspiracies and provocations originating in Colombia and all manner of cross-border crimes that threaten the peace, development, and territorial integrity of our nation. So that's his excuse for destroying a banana plantation in order to set up a national flag in their camp. It's quite the statement for what I would consider a fairly minor disruption of the local area of Colombia. The Colombian government responded in all their typically flamboyant, controversial statements. Quote, "The Venezuelan troops are in Colombian territory." That's all they said. They didn't seem to go into depth at all about that. But it's reassuring to know that the Colombians are aware of their local news. Now, this is the tragic part of the story. The farmer who owns the banana plantation was actually forced to leave. The governor of Columbia State, where the troops set up their camp, said local residents were further rankled by the sight of Venezuelan flag flying on their side of the river. So essentially the Venezuelans kicked out this banana plantation owner, which is another tragic development in this story. When confronted with the allegations, a Venezuelan military official said, quote, "They moved into the area because they recognized a geospatial demarcation line between the two nations." He said that the river's course had also been altered by the degrading that favored Colombia, which might not make a whole lot of sense, but essentially the border between Venezuela and Colombia is set by a river, and so this military man felt that the river was moving into Venezuelan land and making Colombia bigger and Venezuela smaller, which gave him the right to go and destroy some banana crops. Alright, and on to our final little invasion story. And this one comes from the good old US of A. And it was the building of Fort Montgomery, which was built in 1844 as a stronghold to defend against Canadian invasion. The only problem was it was built in Canada. Fort Montgomery has adopted the name Fort Blunder. Construction had begun for the first fort at this location as an octagonal structure with 40-foot high walls. It began in 1816 to protect against an attack from British Canada. While President James Monroe visited the incomplete fortification, it was discovered that there was a surveying error. And it turns out that the fort was inadvertently built on the Canadian side of the border, which garnered it the name Fort Blunder. The fort was actually built 3/4 of a mile north of the Canadian-American border. Once this was discovered, all construction immediately ceased, and the site was abandoned without any discussion between America and Canada. The fort no longer exists, but it said that much of the material was scavenged by the locals and used for their own homes and public buildings. Now, here's the funny cap of this story. In 1926, the United States government actually held an auction to sell this fort, which was actually in Canadian territory, because after they abandoned it in 1816, it garnered a lot of visitors, both local and international, for the untold amounts of abandoned lumber, bricks, and windows and doors, which, those cost a lot of money back then. So if you just have the abandoned material hanging around, people would go and steal some of it. So the Americans saw this as an opportunity to sell a historical landmark. They eventually auctioned it off for a winning bid of $5,310,000. However, the sale was not completed. As of 2019, the fort and land surrounding it remain for sale. So the person the person said, 5 million, that's too much for this property that actually can't belong to the American government because it's in Canadian territory. And now there's a big brouhaha by local preservationists that say that the fort should be protected as a historical landmark. Alright, it's time to go to a break. Stay tuned for after the break, where I will go through my top 10 gods. Stay tuned for that.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back to the GSMC Weird News podcast. We just talked about some unintentional misunderstanding invasions. And now we're going to talk about my top 10 gods. So, hopefully this might get a little controversial. Some people might get a little offended. Please don't ask your god to smite me. If your god ends up being number 3, then that's just tough luck, buddy. All right, let's dive in. Now, look, folks. I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna break this to you right now. I haven't prepared this segment at all. All I know is that I'm doing top 10 gods. So let me go on the old World Wide Web, the old www, and search coolest gods. Alright, so the first fella who came up is Kronos. Now this is a big beefy looking character with a nice beard, kind of like myself. He has a curved knife and frankly a very, very revealing toga, which is never a problem when you're looking at your top 10 coolest gods. Now it's well known amongst god enthusiasts that Kronos was the ruling god before the age of the Olympian deities. Kronos proved himself to be the strongest amongst the gods when he became the ruler by castrating his own father. That sounds like a brutal form of Agni Kai, if you ask me. Now, I don't want to raise any eyebrows, but his father, the one he castrated, that was Uranus. He castrated Uranus. Now, for some reason, Kronos got all nervous when he had some kids. He named his kids Zeus, Poseidon, and Aphrodite. And in his paranoia, he swallowed them to keep them from ever surpassing him, as you do. But eventually, as all mothers and wives do, they betrayed him and rescued Zeus, who fought him off and banished him into the dreaded Tartarus, the underworld. If you've ever read Percy Jackson, you know what I'm talking about. Alright, now it's time to move on. So, number 9, Prometheus. The god of the people. He was one of the most popular Titan gods. And he's known for being assigned the task of molding mankind out of clay. So if you were wondering where we came from, it's from, Prometheus' sandbox. And as all fathers do, he became attached to his offspring, mankind. This caused him to cross paths with many other gods who were not fond of humans, including the mighty Zeus, who, believe it or not, did not care for the humans. So, eventually Zeus got so pissed at the humans, so peeved, as you say, he took fire away from mankind, and Prometheus saw fit to steal it back from him and give it back to the humans. Zeus punished him by chaining him to a rock, where an eagle would eat his liver every day, because, of course, his liver regenerated as he was immortal, because immortal beings require livers. And, of course, eventually he was freed by Hercules. If you've never seen the Disney movie Hercules, get on that. Some historical gold there. Alright, number 8. So, number 8 is Ganesha, the Hindu god of beginnings. Now, for those who don't know Ganesha, he's a man with the head of an elephant with multiple arms. So, that's the main reason he scored number 8 on this list. He's an inspiring character. He's the remover of obstacles, the patron of arts and sciences, and the, quote, diva of intellect and wisdom. That should be my new nickname. I'm the diva of intellect and wisdom. He was always honored at the starts of rites and ceremonies, being the god of beginnings. And he's often associated with human birth, which is great. Of course, he's the god of beginnings, so why would he not be associated with that? Alright, that was nice and heartwarming. Time to go to number 7, Hades. Hades was, of course, god of the underworld. His brothers were Zeus and Poseidon, and his name means the unseen one. Even though everybody eventually sees him in Greek folklore, of course. If you die, you see Hades. Now, one of the modern misunderstandings of Hades is that he is a negative character in Greek culture, but actually death is looked upon with inclination. Hades is often portrayed as a passive character rather than an evil one. His role is maintaining relative balance, rather than creating chaos and hate, as he is normally represented in modern media. Modern media. He is known as one of the most just gods, always holding his subjects equally accountable to his laws. And not much is known about him because the Greeks refrained from giving him much thought to avoid attracting his attention. So, I'm not going to get too into depth, but it's kind of fun to know the, not so much alternative history, but the left behind history of Hades, the god who was often respected by the Greeks, not so respected by us. Alright, time for number 6. Alright, now this is where I'm going to get into trouble, alright? And it might not be the one you're thinking of. I'm already in trouble. Alright, number 6, Buddha. Now, of course, Buddha is not actually a god, but he kind of represents a large portion of the world's population's religious views, so I think it's important that we dive into it and I give you a nice hot take on Buddha. Now, much like Jesus, most people have accepted that Buddha actually did live. It's said that he was under the reign of the ruler of the Magadha Empire in China and died during the early years of Ajatasattu. Oh, I'm going to cut that out. It's said that Buddha actually did live, during 558 BCE to 491 BCE. It's said that he was the son of a very rich man, and that this rich man kept Buddha from all the sadness and tragedies on earth. He kept him sheltered. He showed him only the richest and the most beautiful people on the planet, and eventually a homeless person slipped through the gates that Buddha's father set for him in his little utopia, and Buddha saw the suffering in the world and decided to do something about it. So what he did was he went and he sat under a tree. Told you this is where I'd get in trouble. So he sat under a tree he sat under it for 7 days until he finally reached enlightenment. 5 is a tie. It's a tie between Zeus and Thor because both of them can shoot lightning, which I think is pretty cool. It's easy to give Thor the extra push just because he got the movie deal and Zeus just couldn't get the contract signed. But I think they both have their own merit when it comes to natural, marauding power. So stupid. All right, now let's move on to number 4. All right, number 5 is Shiva the Destroyer, our second Hindu god on the list. He's part of the Hindu Trinity, and he is said to be in his highest form, formless, limitless, transcendent, and unchanging, the primal soul of the universe. Which is, if I could have one superpower, it would be that. I think that would be a good pick. He is considered to be omniscient, and his nickname, the Destroyer, comes from the fact that he has the third eye that everybody's always harping about. And if he were to open that third eye, it would destroy the entire universe, existence itself. Pretty hardcore stuff from this Shiva character. And to top it all off, his major sect of Hinduism is called Shaivism. I just think that's a funny name, so that really helps him get into the number 4 spot there. All right, now number 3 is one of my personal favorites, and that is Nike, the goddess of victory, who first of all has the coolest title of any of these gods. It's Goddess of Victory. Such a cool name to be assigned at birth. She is, of course, a Greek god, and she is the daughter of a giant named Pallas and the infernal river Styx. So, a giant and a fiery river get together, and next thing you know, you have a goddess of victory. Pretty interesting upbringing, I would imagine. She also had wings, which I think is pretty neat. Most gods are, they can shoot lightning, or they're omnipresent, or control the entire universe, but she just had wings, and that was all she needed to be the goddess of victory. Alright, I'd love to talk more about her, but we gotta move on. So number 2, the Judean god. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do a blanket number 2 here. This is God of the Jews, God of Christianity. This is Jesus. This is the God of Muhammad, and it's the God of Mormonism. So I'm bundling in all those factions into one nice little package there, as I'm sure they would all love to be, shoved into. I'm causing problems again. There's not much there is a lot to say about this god, which is why there's not much to say about this god. He's already pretty well known, he's omnipresent. He was one of the first monotheistic god, one of the first that was all by himself. But according to the books, he seems to get stuff done. He seems to be a man of action, whether it's smiting the enemies of smiting Sodom and Gomorrah, or granting Solomon any wish he wants, much like a genie. So if they were to make a movie on this god character, they'd probably cast Robin Williams. Well, they would have. I'm just digging a deeper hole for myself, aren't I? Okay, here we go. Number 1. Let me go down my coolest gods list here on Google. Alright, number 1. You know him, you love him. Godzilla. Not much to say about this fella, this character. He stomped on Japan a little bit, and then he saved him from a giant moth. Pretty fantastic god, if you ask me. Most people don't know this, but the name Godzilla actually is a mix of gorilla and whale. So yeah, that's number one. The gorilla whale Godzilla. Moth killer. And all around neat fella. He can shoot laser beams from his mouth. And I don't think any other god can do that. So checkmate. Alright. That was it for today's podcast. I would like to thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would also like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice god-dang review. It would really help us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be downright swell. Thank you, and have a good night.